you here for Patrick Moriarty's workshop. Patrick tells me that we met many decades ago, which I'm sure is true. Many of you may be more familiar possibly with his brother Dennis Moriarty, who of course has created our community. I remember it when it was just a twinkle in Dennis's eye. It's now a huge behemoth. And Patrick is part of that. He's a managing partner of Strategic Australia Communications, which he tells me is not a separate entity, sort of comes under the umbrella of our community. And we're very, very grateful, Patrick, for you coming all the way to Perth, giving us your Saturday morning and your wisdom.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. When I left Melbourne, I was thinking, how good is this going to be? 32 degrees, sun shining, bliss. But no. But regardless of that, thank you for the invitation to speak. I would also like to acknowledge that we're on the lands of the traditional owners, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I haven't got this in the presentation today, but that's a values-based discussion. And whenever we're dealing with money, don't forget there's values associated with it. So whilst I haven't really fleshed that out in an hour, if we probably had a year to talk about it, I would be asking you, who wouldn't you take money from? And I'm going to say sometimes that might be government. Okay, so I really haven't covered that off today, but I think it's a discussion you should have. Okay, now I've called this grant writing for academics, otherwise known as free money. No. Okay, so whilst the focus today is not really the large ARC type grants, I'm going to say what I hope you get out of today is a framework that you could use for any grant submission. Okay, so maybe with no further ado. So what I want to do is put grants in a context for you in terms of funding overall. And really, my aim today is to get you to think not as a grant writer. And I know that might sound counterproductive. What I actually want you to start to write as is as a grant maker. So I want to turn you around from the way you may be writing. What to do if you win, what to do if you don't win, and not winning, I know this might sound odd as well, but it's not losing. Okay, and I'll explain a little bit more of that in a minute when I get you to whip around and what this thing called reporting does, and it shouldn't kill you. So I really want to focus on that bit a little bit towards the end. You're all going to get a copy of the slides, and obviously today's being recorded. I'm also, for those of you that are online, I'm going to be using a whiteboard, but there's a slide that actually fleshes that out as well. But I think doing it on the whiteboard makes it a little bit fresher for people and allows them to connect with it a little bit more. Okay, so some three key thoughts. So the first one I've already mentioned, it's right for the grant maker, not for you. You've really got to turn that whole conversation around, because when we do right for me, it's like, you must give me this money. Okay, I'll explain a little bit more. Why? And that, for those of you that are a little bit older, Delilah does not go on the end of that. But everything you are writing about in your grant submission has to answer why. And regardless, and I'd say this with respect to virtually every community organisation in Australia, it is not what you do that is important, it is why you do it that needs to be in your grant submission. And the final element for our economics researchers today There is a difference between cost and value. And I'm going to flesh that out when we go through a budget. Okay, because sometimes in our grant submissions, we write cost, not value. And I really want to get you thinking about value, not cost. Okay, so you weren't expecting this and you're unprepared, which is why I'm doing it. I've only got an hour. What I would normally do is go around, but have we got any brave souls that would say they need a grant and they're prepared to tell me what they want a grant for? In a non-academic theoretical model, very simple, short, sharp, succinct. Précis summary. Anyone? Go for it.
To spend some time writing a book.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Ruth?
A study that's called Have You Got a Plan? Looking at people who are over 65, finding out whether people consider what they will need in their frail age.
Beautiful.
Working out what a charitable purpose actually is and how it comes to your activities.
Great. Anyone else? It's free money. I could be your fairy godmother.
ANZTSR needs money for our next conference.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Good. Capacity building.
I'm not an academic, it's not about research. I'm with the Grief Centre of Western Australia, and so it's about organisation.
So now I'm going to give you the unenviable task of sitting on the other end of those applications. Okay. One can only get my funding. Your call. I'm going to throw it back to you. I'm going to allow you to evaluate that. And this is a false argument, okay? But I want you to get the reason I'm doing this. You all heard what people said they wanted a grant for. Elizabeth, you've sat on, I don't know how many thousand grant applications on the other end. And I think that's a little bit of an illustration. Is sometimes when you say this is what I want my funding for, it is so bloody wide, it's open for complete and utter interpretation. So when the what gets put to you, nail it. Clear, succinct, exact. So that sitting on the other end of your application, I can visualise it. I can see what the book's about. I can hear the words. I can almost feel it coming off the page. Is everybody clear on that? Because you have no idea how much people want to give you money, but simply so many people just can't get the idea about what this bloody grant application is actually about. It's unclear, or it's so wide I can drive a truck through it. Nail it, please. Okay, so there's another reason I get you to do that. Was any of those grants not worth funding? No. And I'm going to say, sitting in most piles, most applications are worth funding, but we haven't got the money. So I can't fund everything. So when I say not losing, it could well be that you are 11th in line and there's only 10 grants. And I don't know how many times I hear grassroots community groups say, oh, you can never win those bloody things. Put one in, waste of bloody time. Okay, I don't want that to be you. Persist is a really important word. Perseverance is an important word for you in seeking grants. Okay? Nothing, sorry, I shouldn't say nothing. Rarely are any grant applications just frivolous and not worth funding. So here's a pretty good reason why. Does Has anybody in the room today not written a grant application in the last 12 months? Okay. Everybody see the number? I reckon that, I know this is a stunning piece of analysis. Generally speaking, if I don't apply for a grant, I am unlikely to win it. Some of you may have read about sports rorts, and that's why I cannot say that it's not 100% guaranteed. Okay, but normally you've got to get off your bum and apply for it. And I'm going to say that in a lot of cases, people don't apply for it because they see the advice too late and they go, stuff it, I'll do it next time. Next time may not come. That might be your time in the sun in the wonderful world of grant making. 20 so years ago, I sat on a mental health board and you could not, for love or money, get funding for the topic of mental health. Just couldn't get it. Not sexy, not seen as something that people wanted to touch. But you know now that mental health is having a bit of time in the sun. It will not last. Okay? So largely though, it's driven into those streams. Federal government grants, state government grants, local government grants, one time that 3 tiers of government works for us. And we've got philanthropy, community grants, and increasingly corporate and business grants. So who do you think is the largest funder? Local, yeah. 80 billion. It's still largely federal government funding. Okay, and that, I'm going to tell you that slide hasn't changed in about 20 years. Okay, corporate growing a little bit, philanthropy growing a little bit, locals growing, states maybe shrinking a little bit. Okay, but by and large, that hasn't changed. If this was the US, some of you would know, for tax benefits, philanthropy is a much larger beast. But equally, government steps back in that field. Okay, so I want you to think about grants as an opportunity for you and the grant maker to together achieve an outcome. And it's a funding relationship that could be more than once if you do the right thing. And you actually acknowledge your funders. That might be an interesting thing to do. It is not free money. It is not for you to do whatever you like with the money once you get the money. And it's not for you if you're hoping you can deliver it. Be positive that you can get the outcome that you say you are going to get. Not everything works perfectly, but be confident you can achieve what you're saying you can achieve. If you can't, don't apply. Because at the other end of that is a lot of failures. So I'm hoping you know where you can get them. Largely, the federal government has got a grants website. A number of state governments have got grants websites themselves. Otherwise, you have to delve into the lovely bureaucracies and departments. We provide a grants newsletter. It's consolidated and it can be tailored. I'm not here to sell it. But virtually every corporate these days has their own grant programs, whether it's a bank, a supermarket chain, telecommunications companies and the like. But you have also got larger philanthropic trusts that are interested in research, very interested in research. So go into it with your eyes open. Even the smallest group and individual can actually access funding and recognise that it is actually hard work to put it into practice. And I said before about by way of reports, if I'm asking you to recreate the Bible by way of a report for a $5,000 grant, that is not worth taking the funding. Okay, and recognise that when you sign that funding agreement, that is a contract between you, maybe your university, and the funder. Okay, and they should not be your get out of jail free card. It should be part of an overall funding approach that could incorporate all sorts of other streams. I didn't say ask questions if you want, but please feel free to. Don't wait to the end. If something comes up and it's in your head, just yell out. So why would I want you to apply? They actually allow you to expand and grow. It creates a responsive action plan. And I mean action, not inaction. It can lead to organisational change and for change in community. And it's often an opportunity for you to develop partnerships, not just with the funder. Okay, and we were talking briefly before about the work that gets done out there. That networking stuff is really critical. Okay, because it could well be that you met a partner for a future funding application someday over the last 4 days. Don't forget it. And if we do this stuff correctly, it increases the capacity for all of us. So don't forget it and don't ignore it. So what do we need to do before we start? We're going to work on a plan for you. If you think you're going to write a grant application, when you see the grant application, too late. And that why needs to be front and centre of why you are writing. You need to have a reason for someone to give it to you. You need to have someone to be in charge of the project, not a committee. Clear? So if you've got a committee, I want someone on the committee to be the responsible party, to drive it, to make sure it gets done. Doesn't mean they do it all, but they make sure it gets done. And you're going to need time because you're not going to get all of it overnight. And if you are in a university or you are connected to an organisation, for God's sake, your board should know that they've just been committed to deliver something that they weren't actually expecting. And now they have to go off on a tangent and down a rabbit hole. That's not fair. Okay, that's why those approval processes need to be in place. So a plan. For those of you that are watching online, I'm going to work on the whiteboard and I'll try as much as humanly possible to make sure that it follows this screen. So don't worry about that up there. Okay, so in effect, what I'm trying to get you to think of by way of a plan is starting to think of all of the questions you're going to be asked in any grant application. And the first thing that I asked you was, what do you want funding for? Not cheating. So what you want funding for, is it a problem or is it a solution? Solution? Perfect. Can everybody see that I have highlighted S, plural? It is one option. It is not the only option. I know I like written word, but we could do a podcast or we could do something else. Just sort of fleshing this out. So sometimes we come into a grant application and we've got tunnel vision. It's the only thing we can do to solve this problem. So I'm going to say that's one. I want you to try and think of a couple of other options or solutions to that problem. Everybody got what I'm trying to say? All very quiet. Okay, so if this is a solution, what's this?
Solution for what?
Good. That's your why. Why would I fund you to do that? because sounds good. No. So what helps support that why? What am I looking for?
Change people.
Good, change people's lives, getting there. So in the slides, I'm going to tell you, and this sadly is about 25 years ago, when I did a session like this in the western suburbs of Melbourne. And a guy came up to me and he goes, what we need is a disability accessible playground in the western suburbs of Melbourne. What did I say?
Show me the evidence.
Good. That's what I'm going to get. Why? What was the answer? Because we haven't got one. Not a need. Clear? So to support it, stuff that you should all be well aware of, we need evidence. Good. So what's evidence? Describe evidence for me.
Other reasons.
Good. Other research? Where does research get undertaken, Ruth?
Universities.
Universities just in Australia? Okay, good.
And research institutes and in government.
Good. Local community organisations could provide research. Where else? What else?
Lived experience.
Good. What does research look like?
Can include things like stats.
Good. Now we're talking. We're getting warmed up. Still got a long way to go. Stories, good.
Also include things like photographs.
Good. That's why I said look. Photos, videos,
Artistic expression.
good.
Media.
Good. Now you're thinking. There's a lot of things that can be evidence, isn't there? Not just your research. You need to bring this to life. There's someone sitting on the other end of this that you've got to warm up. So in the western suburbs of Melbourne, there are 4,800 children aged between 3 and 12 who currently do not have access to a playground that meets their physical or mental capacity. Does that sound better than, because we haven't got one?
Risks. That's another one.
Okay, good. Okay, now, remember the drought? We had a thing called the drought in Victoria, lasted for about 7 years. My kid played football from the age of 8 till the age of 15 and played one game in the wet. Pretty amazing. All I can remember is playing footy in the wet. And during that time, the number of grants that were given out because there was someone sitting on a ground, a whole lot of people behind him throwing dust in the air. So the visual is just as important. Don't forget it. All of this stuff is evidence. And if you wait for the grant to come out to get it, too late. You're not going to get it. When I talk about stats, think of your headline rates. What is the headline behind that stat that attracts me? Okay, 1 in 4 humans in Australia will face the issue of mental health during their life. Bang, I can connect to that. That's something on the other end of that paper that drags that argument out. Yeah? Don't wait for this to put it together. Do it now. Start on it. It takes time. I'm going to tell you that is your goal. Regardless of grants, that could be bequests, could be legacies, could be donations, could be sponsorships. Don't underestimate the value of that, because without it, you're not getting that. It's just like, because we don't have one. Yeah. And if I call something disability accessible, that narrows my focus, because that playground is actually accessible to the total population, not the narrow population. And sometimes we only look narrow. So can everybody see that I've now got steps and stages of this thing being delivered? Now I'm going to write pre, during, and post. Why would I do that?
Because if you can show what's going to happen afterwards, show the impact of it.
Good. So think of this. What have I got to do before I do that? What have I got to do when I'm doing it? And what have I got to do after I've done it? Clear? What do I do before I do it? What have I got to do when I do it? What have I got to do after it? Clear? Now, you can't see because of the wonders of technology, but at the bottom of this, I have written Economics 101, TPV. That's all I ever got in economics first year, bloody acronyms. Total project value, not total project cost. Because I'm not going to fund you for that. You should have done it. So think of this. I'm a local sports club in the middle of nowhere, and I want to build a new grandstand because our grandstand's falling apart. What have I got to do before I build it?
Council permission.
So, you know how many people forget that?
Demolition.
Architectural.
Good. Right, so everybody heard that, yeah? Did I knock any of that out? No. So all of that is there before it. What's the one thing we're building our building on? Good. How much is that land worth? A lot. So that's already something that we've got permission to build on that has a value. That is part of my total project. If I don't include that, all I see is this. I don't see how it's all put together. Value versus cost. How much do quotes cost? Anyone? Good. So 10 hours, $40 an hour. It's $400. Okay, and this is not exact costings. Okay, does everybody get in what I'm trying to do? If I don't see that, all I see is this. Your research doesn't just appear out of nowhere. You've done work beforehand. How much is that worth? How could it be valued? As a connector to this, we've tested, we've piloted, we've done something. Now, I'm not going to give you that money, but I'm going to take it into account when I see that you have got off your bum and actually done something. That is called momentum. I fund momentum. I don't fund people sitting on their bums going, please. I reckon it's a grass idea. Fund us. Okay. Story in the local paper about need. Sensational. Clip it, send it in. Now I start to pull all this stuff together. Okay. And wherever, because that's a pretty easy thing. That's the under 16s. We're going to get to volunteer to demolish the grandstand. It'll take about 5 minutes. Okay. But I cost it and I value it. All of these need to be costed and valued. Wherever there is something that you are putting in, either physically, and I'm going to encourage you, and I know this is hardest research for pure research grants, is to put in cash yourselves. Where is your contribution? Where is your skin in the game for this to be approved? Okay, and each one of those elements has a value. Is everybody seeing what I'm doing? I'm building it up. Okay, what have you got to do after the building gets built?
Maintain it.
Good, maintain. Because that is the question you are going to be asked. How will this be sustained beyond the life of our funding? What are you going to do? I will come back and see you again in 12 months. Thanks. Guys, so that is why this is important. You will be asked that question every time now. So if you're not thinking about it and have an answer to it, now, does all of this funding have to come from grants? Should it? Okay, so I'm starting to look for a cocktail of grant making. Some grants, some in-kind contribution, some sponsors. My favourite, Bunnings, sausage, sizzle. Okay, so small bits can add up. I can also then start to target local government, state government, federal government. Feds will not fund without the states. States will not fund without the local. So utilise it. And you know, in most cases in that respect, you'll get a multiplier effect on that funding. 3 times the local government grant for a state grant, 4 times the state for a fed. Those sort of factors start to build up. But they do not appear unless you start to plan it. Have I said enough on that? I think I have. Any questions about that? Sorry.
I'm not sure if I'm oversimplifying this or not, but anyway, I mean, but essentially what you're talking about is a budget, which sometimes or sometimes doesn't. I mean, I'm used to doing fundraising applications where nearly always have to put in a budget, but I'm thinking of kind of not for academic research, but for particular projects or programs in the community, etc. So I can kind of follow that. In my mind, that's the kind of budget process and put a budget together in article proposal. But if you're, I mean, my example was writing a book,
yep,
an academic book, would I still be expected to put together a budget in the way that you've just presented?
So I'm going to differentiate the budget bit because I reckon the budget's an outcome.
So this is, yeah.
So what I want you to think of and why I'm spending time on this is because halfway through the project, I don't want you to go, oh shit, I forgot. I'll go back and ask them for a little bit more. Not happening. Okay, so step through the process that you're going to get through, because otherwise you just go, I'm going to write a book, and a book costs this. And then you suddenly realise, damn, I've got to market it at the end of it. I've got to produce it, I've got to print it, and we want it in gold embossed cover. Okay, that's why I'm saying this. Because if you don't step through it, you will forget something. We'll forget the land. Or I forgot that I actually went and spent 10 bloody hours getting all those quotes, chasing people up. Because if I don't do it, I'll forget it. And that is just as much for a research project as building. Okay, it is just as much. I don't know why on earth I use this example, but I always talk about buying 6 chainsaws. Okay, with the SES, we're in the middle of a flood and we need 6 chainsaws. I reckon pretty good evidence. Okay, so if all I do is apply for the 6 chainsaws, what have I forgotten? Licenses, training, fuel, storage, all of that. And all I'm stuck with is the 6 chainsaws and I can't use the bloody things. Okay, and trust me, it happens. Just as much with research as it does for a building project. Yeah? Okay, and the final bit is the easy bit because we've always got so much time. Okay, but how much time have I invested in getting this done up front for each of those elements? Okay, similarly for the during bit, 5 hours, 5 weeks, because this is now your plan schedule for your grant submission. You're going to need to do this, and this is how it all fits together. And look, here's a lovely Gantt chart. Okay, but don't forget the post. And post is acquittal, audit, painting, whatever it might be after it. Do not forget to value it all. Because now, in a $2.3 million grant submission, I'm only asking for this slab from you. This is how it all fits together. I know this is a really basic framework, okay? But listen to the questions I'm now going to ask you. What do you want funding for? Have you considered any other options? Why should I fund it? Have you got any evidence of need? How much do you want? Who else is contributing? How else are they contributing? Is our funding going to be re-requested in 6 months' time? When do you need it? If you've written a grant application, you know those questions are in every grant application. That is very simple because it works. And if you haven't got a plan and you haven't got this in your head before you write a grant, you're now trying to find all of that. And sometimes you're going to go, too much, I'll wait next time. Next time may not come. Okay, so any questions about that? I reckon it's a really simple plan. How am I going for time? 15 minutes. That might be a problem. Okay, don't forget the eligibility. And trust me, people think they're eligible when they're not. And God help Smarty grants. I can remember handwritten grant applications. You cannot go past go if on the first thing we ask you to prove something and you can't prove it, can't apply. Okay, you all know guidelines. Read the bloody things. Okay, it's going to tell you at the very least what will be funded, what won't be funded, who is eligible, who is ineligible. And still people try to apply. If you can connect, okay, particularly with philanthropy. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to ask, am I eligible? Even though I know I'm eligible. Okay, this is about creating a connection to someone who's probably reading at least the first cut of the grant applications. I want you to have a connection. Okay, human nature works for us. Never heard of these people, haven't bothered to pick up the phone, even though in the guidelines it says, please phone to confirm your eligibility prior to making a submission. This one has spoken to me 2 times, maybe 3. Okay, remember there are laws against stalking, not 50. Okay, pick up the phone, connect. Hi, it's me. Here's my project. Those questions I just asked and answered, they're going to ask. And if you go, connection lost. Okay, so have it all ready to go before you pick up the phone. And then at the other end, when you answer all of the questions, they're going to go, my God, someone's finally got it. They actually understand what this is all about. Okay, sometimes you'll get a brush off. Those people do exist, still apply. Okay, so you can see that some of this stuff is not small bickies. Okay, I reckon I could find, I hope I could find $20, $30, $40,000 grant in some of those. These things exist, they're there. So if I go to Smarty Grants, because in many cases that's probably got what you're going to be applying on, and you can see on the right hand side is what I would call my little plan, and the left is the questions of who. Okay, don't forget you're going to be measured, so you should be thinking about your evaluation before you start evaluation, and definitely not 3/4 of the way through your grant. So you can see my little simple example. Okay, so need linked with evidence, linked with an outcome that can be evaluated. Okay, I'm going to say in that context largely output driven, not outcome driven. So for God's sake, don't lock yourself into one field, because in many of the cases, a step or a stage could fit in a gamut of community. So I might get one step funded in each element, or I could get a number of steps funded in different elements. But if you don't sort of think a little bit laterally about what your project is and where these steps and stages fit and who your partners are, you'll look in education. We did a project like this 15 years ago with what was the APDC, the Australian Principals Professional Development Council, and with 70 schools in each of the states and territories. When I put that up, and I purposely asked this in each of the sessions, who in the audience had received a grant in the last 12 months that did not fall under the category of education? How many do you reckon I got out of that 490 odd schools? 2. Now you think schools. Now you know why that's there. That's crazy. Equally though, if I say academic, what's on the other end of your application? Okay, I say bowls club. Now, people of my ilk think pale, male, stale. Younger people think cheap beer. So sometimes it doesn't work. But there are perceptions on the other end of your grant applications for every grant application you ever write. So be creative in your writing. If I do a sport and rec grant and ask, describe your organisation's activities, I'm going to tell you, you can feel the angst coming out of the application. My mate, we said Moonee Ponds Bowls Club. What the hell do you reckon we do? You idiots. Okay? But you can see the second descriptor is a lot fuller and a lot more likely to win a grant. Yeah. So again, don't forget philanthropy. Now, largely you are going to need tax deductibility, GDR, DGR, PBI status. So the organisations that you're with, do they have it? If not, how could they access it? Partnering. So go and find a partner that has it in that similar ilk. I'd say for larger projects, if you think you're doing all of that yourself, you're mistaken. You should have partnerships in those relationships. And with one strict proviso, your partners should know they are your partners. Okay, you can see the stats and the source. I want to get to this. Okay, so very simple again, logic model for grants. So we're looking at the situation coming in. We're going to invest this. Put some time, money, partners, equipment, facilities like today. What comes out of it? We deliver a workshop targeting who? So how could I slice and dice you guys today? Not really, like metaphorically I'm talking. State-based, research stream, male, female, younger, not so young. Okay, so think about all of these elements that you're actually trying to pull together. Okay, but what should it lead to? So let's test it. Have I made you dumber? Fully not. So how could I measure that change post today? Well, let's say today. Good. Good. No, not today. Not going to do that to you. Yeah. How could I measure? Is what I'm trying to say. Good. So I could do a survey, post series evaluation. And I'm sure as researchers, you all know that when we do surveys, by getting the subtle variations in wording in the questions, we can get the result we want. Be careful of bias. Okay. But can I now have evidence to say that this workshop delivered X? 95% of people when asked, or 95% of respondents. So all of those start to come into play. Is that a measurement? Okay. Has that led to change? Maybe. Change of attitude? Maybe. Change perception, knowledge, skills? Maybe. Okay. I'm going to come back in 6 months and haunt you. And I'm going to ask you again, did you actually write a grant application? Did you think about who you would take money from? Have you developed any policies as it relates to that? Have you got procedures in place? Have you gone and gathered that bloody evidence? So everybody now seeing the shift, okay? You know the long-term stuff because you're all used to it. Okay, what we're actually in the grant making business and research to do is all of those changes. What do you think grant makers are in it for? Oh, just give us a quick bloody evaluation. I'll be pretty happy. Yeah. They're interested in the same things as you are. They want change. Change in an economic setting, in a social setting, political setting, maybe. Okay, and that's what you're actually all about. My challenge to you, don't start at the left-hand side. Start at the right. Work back. Do you end up at the same what? That's an interesting question and challenge for you to face. Because sometimes we come at it with our own thoughts and biases on the what. What should it lead to should be almost front of mind for you as researchers. Not, I'd like to do this bit of research. Again, back to that why. Yeah?
On the not Techman question, if you look at the outcomes, that would be a reason to take the money if you feel that who you take the money from will change as well. Like, you know,
So I'll give you an example, and this is a real life example. I've never forgotten this question. Young, dumb. Think young, dumb Pat, not that long ago, sitting in that mental health national board and saying, why don't we take money from drug companies? Okay, and you should have heard pin drop. Like, it was just like, did he just say what I think he said? And what I got back was, because they experimented on us. Pretty values-based focus. What did I say? But that's your view, that's not our client's view. So until you tell me from our clients that we don't touch drug companies, I'll continue to be an Irish Catholic Collingwood supporter. And my values should not be in this boardroom. It should be our clients' values. We ended up with a values-based policy. Now, we didn't take money off drug companies, but it wasn't the boardroom. Because I change that boardroom, I should not get a change in values. They're organisational values, not personal values. And I'm not going to say anything about Essendon Football Club. Okay? Because that shouldn't come into the boardroom. Okay? Equally, we have our own thoughts and values when we're applying for grants. Be conscious of it. It's I won't say it's an argument. It's a philosophical discussion that you should have in organisations, and it doesn't often get had until it's too late. Here's the money being waived. Yep, I'm desperate. Okay, don't get to it. But think through this logically. That's why it's logic model. Okay, I think I've said enough on budget, yeah? But don't think you're going to get all your money up front. Okay, so think through the budget stages. Have I got a percentage? Can we ask for overheads? How the hell are we putting that university admin element into that bloody grant application? And what do we call that? Fat. Just put fat. Can we put a contingency or a risk element in? If so, how much? Is it 10%, 2%, 5%? These all sound like intelligent questions to ask on the phone, don't they? Which sort of builds credibility. How much is a volunteer worth? Not enough, but they put a dollar value on it. Sometimes you will get different elements for professional v ditch digger. Okay, what about your partner contributions and costs? And I'm going to say it, what are you putting in? If it's time, blood, sweat and tears, fine, but value it. So I went in search of some academic research that talked about academic versus real grant writing. I would highlight accessible language. Bring it back to people on the other end of your application. What does that mean? We talked before about community capacity building. It is one of my favourite terms. What the hell is community capacity building? Okay, describe it. Tell me what it is. Don't just leave it hanging out there for interpretation. Tell me how you are going to describe community capacity building. Okay. And you will see everything on that right-hand side is very succinct. Okay. You will be pigeonholed to 100 words or less. Okay. There is nothing wrong with having different versions, short, medium, large. Okay. Do not repeat, do not try and hit word limits. You are not first year students. Don't count the bloody things. Smarty Grants will do that for you. Okay. But rework your work. Does it make sense? Does it bring my application to life? If I was on the other end of this application, would I get excited? Because I should. Give me the passion. Okay, make sure the tone of your application is optimistic, well-reasoned, clear and concise. Give me your headline. Only use applications and budget templates provided by the funding body. Now, largely these days, you're going to get that on some form of electronic system. Don't try and say, oh, no, I don't really want to follow the electronic system. I think I could create a better one. Not working. Demonstrate your credibility and capability. Pick up the phone. Okay, your budget should link back to your plan. And if it doesn't, I've got concerns. Clearly, money in is money out. There is no money left over that allows Pat to do a research trip to Europe. Yeah, personally. If income is earned in the process of your research and or your grant, that is part of the acquittal process. If you are holding an event and you're going to record the event and it was going to be sold on CDs, do people still buy CDs? No. However, it may now be transmitted and monetised. There you go. I've got buzzwordy. It is income and it needs to be acquitted. List your other sources of funding. Have letters of support from them, current and targeted to what they're doing, not from a dead politician. And rework your work. You know it, get someone else to read it. Does this sound like me? So you should have all of this stuff in one spot ready to go. If it's not, you got problems, because now I'm running around trying to find it. What is this thing that we are called? Are we a company limited? Have we got DGR status? What's our constitutional rules if they're applicable? Have I got our statement of purpose, our vision, values and objectives? Have we got a strategic plan? Those don't exist. Have we got our certificate of currency for insurance? All of those stuff, okay? One spot, not in 30 different parts of the university. One spot. You don't win, don't get upset. I know. Deep breath, build a bridge, get over it. Less than 10% of people who are unsuccessful in grants bother to make contact with the grant maker. Hear me? Less than 10%. Now, if I was one of those unsuccessful ones, I'm now picking this hat up. I'm going to make the phone call. Hi, look, it's me. I spoke to you before I put in the application. I didn't win. I'm not asking for a full debrief, but I'm just wondering, would you accept another application in the future for the same thing? Or would one of these look more attractive, or one of these steps or stages? It's about building that next step. It is not getting a full debrief. Okay? It is about developing that relationship. Sometimes you will get a full debrief. I would caution against appealing. If you have an appeal process, really think through that if you really, really, really want to appeal. Okay? More. You win. Thank you. It's a nice thing to say, and sometimes doesn't get said. I can remember saying someone had written a letter of thanks to the Minister of the department when they received funding. That letter got read out in Parliament. It was that bloody rare. I reckon if there was an election and the Minister was going to find somewhere to launch something, that would be first in line. Don't forget to use all of these things. Invite them, they're not coming. Okay, but it's nice to be asked. Send them regular reports through the progress. If it's a 12-month program, I don't expect you to get the money at the start. The last thing I hear from you is the audited statement. Okay, I will not help you if it's gone off track unless you pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got a bit of a problem. I can give you a variation of the agreement, push it out a little bit. We might care for you. Okay, but pick up the phone. Sign the agreement, acquit it. Don't forget you're going to have to write that report balanced. Okay, make sure you don't forget to report. Because if you don't report, whoever is coming after you will not be able to apply. So it should say what we said we were going to do, what we did. What worked well, but as researchers, you should know there are lessons in failure. So what didn't work well? Don't sugarcoat it. Give me the measurements. Give me feedback, videos, stories, all that stuff that we said we want as evidence. The last thing they want is the finance report, but if it's government, it's public money. So I need it. And again, it should not be the first time they've heard from you since you won your grant. A little bit over time. Are there any questions? Any?
Just a moment. Since COVID, to be careful about the budget. We were doing. We were supposed to buy something, not realizing that since COVID, the system is shipping. Plus, the cost of shipping from Europe just where it's gone.
Yep.
So it moved.
I don't think anyone 3 years ago would have, when they're doing the risk management as part of their grant application, have factored that in. Okay. But risk management is also about learning. So we should be learning from those elements and saying in the future, we're going to have to start to plan for pandemic and what that might be. So yeah, really great comment.
Because we've been running to time so well for this conference. Patrick, I'd like to thank you. A small little gift from us so you remember us.
Thank you.
I hope what I'll be able to do in 12 months is tell you how many of these people heard you, applied for a grant and got one.
Yay.
And the thing to do, as I always say, Patrick, he sort of said it in a much clearer way, I think. I always say there's a stack of money out there. Just go and get it. Work out what you want, all the things that Patrick has said. And so I will come back to you in 12 months to say that trip was worth it. And here are the people who took your advice and got some money. So can we please thank Patrick? Please feel free to stay on as I'm going to try and make a few comments about the conference. Or sorry, should I? Can you hear me back there without a mic? I'll try and speak up. So wonderful that so many of you have stayed on. Without all of you, there'd be no conference, and there certainly wouldn't have been a successful conference. I thought I'd just say something about what it was that this board, who worked so hard, what it was we tried to do. ANZTSR, as you all know, as you've heard it a number of times, is 30 years old, and it needed a bit of reinvigorating. And that's what this conference was going to do for the organisation. If we could get a number of, and so we thought we need to reinvigorate the organisation. Listening to Patrick, we took a risk. Let's go to Perth. And all of this was planned during COVID. And we had no idea while we were planning it, the sort of changes that COVID has wrought on everyone. So let's go to Perth. Expensive, people said, who'll come. And I said, well, we've never been. The organisation hasn't been in 30 years. Perth's very important. In terms of the NGOs, you know, they weren't locked down like Melbourne or Sydney. So possibly things are different there. We might be able to learn something and understand what's happening there. So the board, we took the risk. We said Perth. We wanted to also establish a significant NGO lecture, because I don't feel that the whole sector has money usually to do those sorts of things. You know, there are lots of corporate lectures and, you know, you hear them on the ABC. And I thought possibly, you know, we're now 30 years old, we're mature enough that we should establish an oration, an NGO oration. So first thing you had to do, you had to find some money. So we were very fortunate to get the money from the Fieldman Foundation, and you would remember Pat, I'm sure, who had a sister Margaret, and they both left money in this Fieldman Foundation. So we got some money for the Fieldman oration. Then we had to get a speaker. We tried a number for all sorts of reasons, and I think in the end, I thought Kate Cheney actually fitted the bill. Because she'd worked in the sector, she actually understood it. And when I invited her, she said, look, I've got so much to say about this, and this will provide an opportunity to say it. And I love the sector, but I've got criticisms of it, and I think there should be, you know, changes within it. And for the board and our wonderful accountants on the board, there was the added benefit that Kate didn't need an airfare or accommodation. She had plenty here. And the other thing, of course, is that now we have a politician who really does know about it. I talked to Kate, you know, we might meet the other Teals about some of our issues. So ANZTSR has gone from no one knowing about us to a few people knowing. And as many of you know, I then got in touch with ABC Radio Big Ideas, and I hoped that they would record Kate, but they don't record sitting politicians, but they were happy to record Richard Dennis, who was our keynote. So that'll go out to the wider community. People will listen to it. It's well listened to. Sort of people have got an interest in the sort of things that we do. So I think that's another one of our aims, you know, just sort of rejuvenating the organisation and understanding it. And then we come to the conference, and I think I haven't been to all the sessions, but I've been to a number, and they've been really interesting. I think the time period's too short. Everyone could have spoken for an hour. I went to a terrific session where you spoke about grief in your organisation. Wonderful sessions where people talked about the importance of culture and the arts and what that does for vulnerable people. Now, I think that's a change of policy. Some of this research, what I'm going to do personally is follow it up, because I think we can make a really strong case to the government, especially now with the new government, that we know, I mean, I know from things that I've, you know, been able to fund in Melbourne, how extraordinarily effective any form of culture is for people who are vulnerable. And we keep doing the same thing in terms of welfare, and I think it's time if we could
some of this significant research would be wonderful if we could change some policy. Might be ambitious, but I remember what Kate said to me the other night at dinner. I thought, it must be extraordinarily ambitious to think about standing for Parliament. And then I did stand and then I won. And now I'm thinking all those other things that I saw as too ambitious, they're suddenly not too ambitious. I'm going to have a go. And I think that's one of the things that we should do as well. So I think, and I know from hearing from many of you that many of you enjoyed the papers. Some of the best time at the conference, I think, has been the social occasions, the people have been able to talk. I know I keep rustling you in, but we'll have another opportunity to stop for lunch in about 10 minutes and have the last word. And then before I mean, I could say much, much more. And I've talked to quite a number of you. And I think what's been really interesting, people have said, look, I didn't know about you. I've come, people have been very friendly. I've learned a lot, but people have been very friendly. Now that might be, you know, people who work even as academics on the sector, that they said most other conferences I've been to, one woman said to me, you know, there are lots of little cliques. This hasn't been like that. And I've enjoyed that aspect of it. So once again, thank you all. I've got people to thank. You might think that we've had the odd IT fairies running around. We've had a particular wonderful, wonderful Ben Perks as the major fairy, who's been everywhere. Thank you, Ben. You have done all of this. The organisation has been seamless, absolutely seamless. I know that you've had lots of support with some of your colleagues, and I wish I'd met them all, but I want to thank Claire Fina. Claire, where are you? Wonderful. Haven't just us. Oh, you're been wonderful. And when? Not here. Oh, well, someone could tell you. Ali Katsamaris. Thank you. Thank you. Penny York. Thank you, Penny. Ali. Car's not here. And Xavier Reader. Xavier Reader. And then in charge of the smaller and the larger group of fairies is the professor. So David. They've just been terrific. I mean, it has been seamless. I don't think there's been a hitch. And I also want to welcome a group of UWA students who are joining us for lunch today. They're members of WAUC, a management consultancy charity. Now, there you are. They got together that empowers top university students to provide high-quality consulting services to the not-for-profit sector and charities in order to help overcome challenges they may face and enhance their social impact. A great initiative driven by the students and giving them great experience in also building the sector. So we'll meet them out here when we go to lunch. But again, I would like to thank this extraordinary board, those of you who are left. Thank you, Ruth, very, very much. Ian Murray, who was the academic chair, David again. Couldn't have done it without you. It was a team effort. And thank you all for coming and making this such a memorable and I think exciting conference. Thank you. And we've got a cart. No, we haven't got it. We've got food out here, haven't we? We don't have to go to the. Oh, did we? Okay. So we're going to get our food from a not-for-profit organisation who bought their caravan in with good food.
Dan? Megan? Is it Dan? Cameron. He is an academic continuous community development
At Murdoch,
and runs a not.
and runs a not-for-profit then.
And one I've got everyone's attention, I think we should thank Liz.
Yeah.
for the lecture.
Yes, I will.
Or you want? You're very welcome to stay for lunch. I was going to say. So much money. But I'm only talking trustee company. Have lunch with you one day.
Yeah.
I'm actually the trustee office.
Here.
Invisible. They've got 40% Australia's police. How much? £2,000. They got no time to tell us what they PhD on 32 police studies. But you know, this means you don't get money. Everything you read in your life. Are you going to come and talk?
Yeah, no, I'm just checking.
Well, you do what you need to do.
Just,
Oh, you're conscious.
we've had to change our flight, so I'm just
Oh,
going
okay.
to check this.
You will later.
Thank you for that.
Oh, no worries.
So you're going to share the slides?
Yes.
Oh, great. I like that planning matrix. I kind of make a home. I really like that style of the value.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great.
Thanks.